The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with quiet laughter as Admiral Zexstar of the Vorthic Empire stood before the massive holographic display. The blue-scaled reptilian's yellow eyes gleamed with amusement as he pointed at the small red dot on the star map. "This is what the humans call their rapid response fleet," he said, his forked tongue flicking out between razor-sharp teeth. 50 ships. That's all they're sending to protect the Outer Rim colonies. The assembled delegates from 12 different species erupted in more laughter. The insectoid Krythek ambassador clicked his mandibles together in what passed for chuckling among his kind. 50 ships? We lose more than that in training exercises. Ambassador Velthari of the Crystalline Nexari leaned forward, her translucent form shimmering. Perhaps the humans are making a joke? Surely they cannot be serious about defending 3 entire star systems with such a tiny force. Admiral Zexstar pulled up detailed scans of the human fleet. The ships looked sleek but unremarkable compared to the massive dreadnoughts and battle cruisers that dominated galactic warfare. Each human vessel was roughly the size of a standard frigate. Nothing that would strike fear into any seasoned military commander. Intelligence reports suggest these ships are called destroyers, the Admiral continued. Each one carries approximately 200 crew members. Basic plasma weapons, standard shielding, nothing we haven't seen before from dozens of other species. The Morvani delegate, a slug-like creature with multiple eye stalks, slithered closer to the display. 200 per ship? That's unusually small for a crew complement. Most species require at least 500 for vessels of that size. Exactly my point, Zexstar replied. The humans are either incompetent or desperate. Perhaps both. They're sending understaffed, undergunned ships to face the greatest pirate armada the galaxy has ever seen. The room fell into a more serious tone as the conversation shifted to the real threat at hand. For months, the Void Reapers had been terrorizing the Outer Rim, hitting colony after colony with brutal efficiency. Their fleet consisted of over 800 stolen and modified warships, commanded by Captain Krelinox, a rogue Vorthak who had turned to piracy after being exiled from the Empire. The Reapers have 3 battle cruisers, 15 heavy destroyers, and hundreds of attack craft, reported General Mordic of the Thani Confederacy. They've been using hit-and-run tactics, striking settlements before defensive fleets can respond. The death toll is already in the millions. The Council had debated for weeks about how to respond. The pirate fleet was too mobile for the traditional massive battle groups favored by most galactic powers. By the time a proper armada could be assembled and deployed, the Reapers would have moved on to terrorize other systems. The Terran Federation requested permission to handle this threat, announced Councillor Yithron, the Chamber's moderator. They claim their small force is specifically designed for this type of operation. This brought fresh waves of laughter from the assembled delegates. The humans had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and while they had shown promise in various fields, military prowess was not considered one of their strengths. Their home system's defense. Fleet was respectable, but nothing compared to the centuries-old military traditions of species like the Vorthak or the battle-hardened. Veterans of the Krythek swarms. Let them try, Admiral Zexstar said with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. When they fail, we'll be ready with a proper response. The Vorthik 7th Fleet stands ready to deploy 300 ships at a moment's notice. As does the Krythek War Swarm, added the insectoid ambassador. We have 500 vessels prepared for immediate deployment. The human representative, Ambassador Sarah Chun, had remained silent throughout the discussion. She was a small woman by galactic standards, unremarkable in appearance compared to the towering reptilians, crystalline beings, and insectoid creatures around her. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and confident. The Terran Federation appreciates the Council's concern, she said, standing slowly. However, we believe our rapid response fleet is more than adequate for this situation. We request 48 hours to demonstrate our capabilities. The laughter that followed was even louder than before. Even some of the more diplomatic species struggled to contain their amusement at the humans' apparent overconfidence. 48 hours? General Mordic S. tentacles writhed in what his species considered extreme humor. The Void Reapers will tear through your little fleet in 48 minutes. Ambassador Chun smiled, an expression that seemed almost predatory despite her small stature. We shall see, General. We shall see. As the council session ended and the delegates filed out, many were already making private communications to their respective fleets. The consensus was clear: the humans would fail spectacularly, and when they did, the real military powers of the galaxy would need to step in to clean up the mess. What none of them knew was that the 50 ships of the Terran Rapid Response Fleet had already departed for the Outer Rim 3 days ago. And what none of them understood was that when humans designed a ship called a destroyer, they meant it quite literally. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the TRFS Relentless, watching the tactical display as his fleet moved through hyperspace toward their target. The other 49 ships of his task force were spread out in a precise formation, each one a masterpiece of human military engineering disguised as a simple frigate. Estimated time to intercept? He asked his navigation officer. 18 hours, sir. The Reapers are still hitting the mining colonies in the Kepler system. They don't know we're coming? Webb nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had fought pirates before, during humanity's expansion into their local stellar neighborhood. This would be different only in scale. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Battle stations in 16 hours. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human colonies. The mining colony of New Perth was dying. Thick black smoke rose from the administrative buildings while orange flames licked at the processing facilities. The Void Reapers had been systematic in their destruction, targeting everything that could generate income for the Galactic Trade Federation. Captain Krellanox stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive battle cruiser Death's Edge, watching the carnage below with satisfaction. The exiled Vorthok had built his reputation on brutality, and today was no exception. His reptilian features were scarred from countless battles, and his cybernetic left arm gleamed under the ship's harsh lighting. "Status report," he growled to his second-in-command. A hulking Thani warrior named Gorvak. 17 cargo vessels captured, mining equipment stripped from 3 facilities, and approximately 8,000 civilians rounded up for the slave markets, Gorvik replied, his multiple arms gesturing at various displays. Total haul should exceed 2 million credits once we reach the buyers in the Veil Nebula. Krellanox nodded approvingly. The Outer Rim colonies were perfect targets, far from the major trade routes and heavily defended systems. The Council's response time was always too slow, and by the time they organized a proper military response, the Reapers would be long gone. "Sir, we're detecting an anomaly on long-range sensors," reported the sensor operator, a nervous-looking Nexari whose crystalline form flickered with anxiety. "Multiple contacts approaching from galactic north. Size and composition?" Krellanox demanded. 50 contacts, sir. They single quotes read ... small, frigate class, possibly destroyer variants. Unknown configuration. The bridge fell silent for a moment before Krellanox burst into laughter. 50 frigates? Someone's either very brave or very stupid. Probably a corporate security force thinking they can play hero. Gorvek pulled up the tactical display, studying the approaching ships. Their vector suggests they'll be here in approximately 6 hours. Should we withdraw? Withdraw? Krellanox's yellow eyes blazed with fury. From 50 frigates? The Death's Edge alone could handle that many ships. Signal the fleet. We'll teach these fools what happens when you interfere with the Void Reapers. 6 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Captain Webb stood calmly on the bridge of the Relentless, studying the tactical situation with practiced eyes. The pirate fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted, still in orbit around New Perth. Enemy fleet composition? He asked his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Torres. 3 battle cruisers, 15 heavy destroyers, approximately 700 smaller craft ranging from corvettes to modified cargo haulers, she replied. They've formed a defensive perimeter around the planet. Webb nodded. And the numbers were actually better than expected. Intel had suggested the Reapers might have as many as 1,000 ships, but it appeared Krellanox had split his forces to hit multiple targets simultaneously. Signal from the enemy flagship. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "they're demanding our immediate surrender." "Put it through," Webb ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Krellanox's scarred reptilian face. The pirate captain's expression was one of amused contempt. "I am Captain Krellanox of the Void Reapers," he declared. "You are outnumbered 16 to 1. Surrender now, and I might let some of you live long enough to be sold as slaves." Webb stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the Terran Federation Rapid Response Fleet. You are guilty of piracy, murder, and crimes against sentient beings. Surrender immediately, and you will be given fair trials under galactic law." Krellanox's laughter echoed through the bridge speakers. "Terran Federation? I've never heard of you. Another minor species playing at being warriors, I assume. You have 10 minutes to surrender before I demonstrate why they call me the Butcher of the Outer Rim." The transmission ended, and Webb turned back to his crew. The bridge was quiet, professional, and deadly calm. These weren't parade ground soldiers or inexperienced recruits. Every human on every ship in the fleet was a veteran of multiple combat operations. "Fleet status?" Webb asked. "All ships report ready for combat operations," Torres replied. "Weapon systems armed, shields at full power, and battle computers online." Webb studied the tactical display one more time. The pirate fleet had arranged itself in a classic defensive formation, using the larger ships to protect the smaller craft while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. It was textbook strategy, the kind taught at military academies across the galaxy. It was also exactly what the human fleet had been designed to counter. "Signal the fleet," Webb ordered. "Execute pattern Delta 7. Primary targets are the battle cruisers. Secondary targets are heavy destroyers. Ignore the smaller craft until the major threats are neutralized." "Sir," Torres said quietly, "the crew is requesting permission to activate the full combat protocols." Webb paused, considering. The 50 ships of the Rapid Response Fleet had been built with specific design parameters. They looked like standard frigates to external sensors, but their actual capabilities were carefully hidden behind false hull readings and sensor baffles. "Granted," he said finally. "Signal all ships, weapons free, full military power authorized." Throughout the fleet, similar scenes played out on 49 other bridges. Human crews that had been holding back their true capabilities for weeks finally received permission to show what they could really do on the TRFS Vengeance. Captain Lisa Rodriguez watched as her engineering team brought the ship's true power plant online. What had appeared to be a simple frigate fusion reactor was actually a miniaturized antimatter containment system capable of powering weapons that most species mounted only on battle cruisers on the TRFS Thunder. Captain James Park authorized the deployment of his ship's hidden weapon systems. Panels slid back along the hull, revealing missile tubes and plasma cannons that had been concealed by sophisticated holographic projectors. 50 ships that had seemed like insignificant frigates suddenly began radiating energy, signatures that made them appear far larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Krellanox stared at his sensor displays in confusion. "What's happening?" "The readings from those ships just changed completely." "Sir," the sensor operator stammered, "they're showing battle cruiser level power signatures now. And they're moving faster than anything that size should be able to move." The human fleet had begun its attack run, accelerating toward the pirate formation at speeds that defied conventional understanding of large ship maneuvers. The Rapid Response Fleet had been designed for exactly this scenario, built to close distance quickly against numerically superior forces and deliver devastating firepower before the enemy could properly respond. "All ships, open fire," Webb ordered. The galaxy was about to learn why humans called their ships destroyers. The first volley from the human fleet lit up space like a miniature star being born. 50 ships that had looked like simple frigates suddenly unleashed firepower that belonged on vessels 10 times their size. Streams of plasma bolts, antimatter torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles crossed the void between the two fleets in seconds. Krelanox watched in horror as the first wave of destruction struck his outer perimeter. 3 of his heavy destroyers simply vanished, their shields overwhelmed so quickly that their hulls vaporized before they could even register the hits. The smaller craft fared even worse, with dozens of corvettes and modified cargo haulers exploding in brilliant flashes of light. How is this possible? He roared, his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his command chair hard enough to leave gouges in the metal. Those are frigates. They shouldn't have that kind of firepower. Gorvek was frantically working at his tactical station, trying to coordinate a response. "Sir, the enemy vessels are using some kind of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors can't get accurate readings on their true capabilities. They're moving faster than anything we've encountered before." The human fleet was indeed moving with impossible speed and precision. Each destroyer executed complex maneuvers that should have torn apart any normal ship, pulling acceleration forces that would have turned most crews into paste against their bulkheads. But human ships were built differently, with inertial dampening systems that allowed their crews to survive maneuvers that would kill other species. Captain Webb watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as his fleet carved through the outer edges of the pirate formation. The Reapers were trying to respond, but they were hampered by their own numbers. The larger ships couldn't fire effectively without risking hits on their own smaller vessels, and the smaller craft were being systematically eliminated by the human destroyers. "Enemy battlecruiser is turning to engage," Lieutenant Commander Torres reported. "The Death's Edge is moving to intercept us directly." "Good," Webb replied. "Signal the Retribution and the Righteous. Form up on us for a coordinated attack. Time to show Captain Krelanox what real firepower looks like." The 3 human destroyers broke away from the main fleet and accelerated directly toward the massive pirate flagship. The Death's Edge was an impressive vessel, nearly a kilometer long and bristling with weapons. Its shields could probably withstand the combined firepower of a dozen standard frigates. Unfortunately for Krelanox, he wasn't facing standard frigates. The Death's Edge opened fire first, its massive plasma cannons sending bolts of superheated energy toward the approaching human ships. The shots that should have destroyed smaller vessels instead splashed harmlessly against shields that glowed briefly before returning to normal. "Impossible," Krelanox snarled. "Those shields are absorbing battlecruiser-grade weapons." The answer lay in human engineering philosophy. While other species built larger ships to mount larger weapons and shields, humans had learned to miniaturize their technology. The shield generators on each destroyer were the same models used on much larger vessels, packed into smaller hulls through advances in materials, science, and power distribution. But it was the human response that truly shocked the pirate captain. The relentless Retribution and Righteous opened fire in perfect synchronization. What emerged from their weapons bays wasn't the light plasma bolts or simple kinetic projectiles that most frigates carried. Instead, each ship unleashed a barrage of antimatter torpedoes, heavy plasma cannons, and something the pirates had never seen before. "Sir, they're firing some kind of kinetic projectile," the sensor operator reported, his voice shaking. "Velocity is. This can't be right. Sir, those projectiles are moving at 12% of light speed." The human mass drivers were indeed firing relativistic projectiles. Small chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds. When they struck the Death's Edge's shields, the impact released energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. The pirate flagship's defensive screens flared, brilliant white before beginning to fail under the sustained assault. Krelanox felt his ship shudder under the impacts. "All power to forward shields. Return fire with everything we have." But the human ships were no longer where his gunners expected them to be. The 3 destroyers had split apart and were moving in an intricate dance around the larger vessel, their superior speed and maneuverability making them almost impossible to target effectively. Each time the Death's Edge's weapons turned to track one ship, the others would strike from a different angle. Meanwhile, the rest of the human fleet was systematically dismantling the remainder of the pirate armada. The Reaper's numerical advantage was meaningless when their opponents could destroy multiple ships with each volley and move too quickly to be effectively targeted in return. Captain Rodriguez on the Vengeance was leading a group of 10 destroyers against the second battlecruiser. The enemy vessel, a captured Thani dreadnought called the Savage Dawn, was putting up fierce resistance, but it was fighting the kind of battle it was never designed for. "Target their weapon batteries," Rodriguez ordered. "Precision strikes. I want that ship disabled, not destroyed." The human weapons were accurate enough to target individual systems on enemy vessels, while the pirates were using brute force tactics, spraying fire across general areas and hoping for hits. The human gunnery computers could place shots exactly where they would do the most damage. The Savage Dawn's main guns went silent one by one, as human fire found their power couplings and targeting systems. Within minutes, the massive ship was effectively helpless, its weapons offline and its engines damaged. The third battlecruiser, seeing the fate of its companions, attempted to withdraw from the battle. The Crimson Fang, another captured vessel, turned away from the human fleet and began accelerating toward the system's edge. It never made it. 8 human destroyers led by Captain Sarah Kim on the TRFS Justice intercepted the fleeing vessel in less than 20 minutes. The Crimson Fang's captain tried to surrender, but his ship had been identified as the vessel responsible for the massacre at the Harmony Colony 3 months earlier. The Justice delivered the galaxy's judgment with a full spread of antimatter torpedoes. Back at the center of the battle, Krellonox watched his empire crumble around him. More than half of his fleet was already destroyed or disabled, and the human ships showed no signs of slowing down. The Death's Edge was barely holding together under the continued assault from the 3 human destroyers. "Sir, we have to abandon ship," Gorvik urged. The hull integrity is failing. We can't take much more of this." Krellonox stared at the tactical display, unable to comprehend how 50 small ships had destroyed his armada. "Who are these humans? How did they build ships like this?" He was about to learn that the ships were only part of the answer. The real difference lay in the crews that operated them. Captain Webb's voice crackled across the communication channels, broadcast to every surviving pirate vessel in the system. "This is Captain Webb of the Terran Federation. You are defeated. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic law. Continue fighting, and you will be destroyed." For the first time in his career as a pirate, Krellonox considered surrender. But his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat to a species he had never heard of. Before today, that pride was about to cost him everything. Krellonox's response to Captain Webb's surrender demand was to order every remaining ship in his fleet to ram the human vessels. It was a desperate, suicidal tactic, but the pirate captain preferred death to the humiliation of surrender to an unknown species. "All ships ramming speed," he roared across the fleet communications. "If we're going to die, we take these humans with us." The surviving pirate vessels, nearly 300 ships of various sizes, turned toward the human fleet and began accelerating at maximum speed. It was a terrifying sight. Hundreds of ships willing to sacrifice themselves for one final act of defiance. Captain Webb watched the approaching ships with calm calculation. All vessels implement Protocol 7, switching to point defense mode. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for decades to come. The 50 human destroyers suddenly sprouted what looked like hundreds of new weapons from hidden panels along their hulls. Close-in weapon systems, advanced laser arrays, and rapid-fire plasma cannons emerged from concealed compartments, transforming each ship into a bristling fortress of defensive firepower. The first wave of ramming ships met a wall of precisely targeted fire. Human point defense systems, designed originally to stop incoming missiles and torpedoes, proved equally effective against small spacecraft. The weapons tracked multiple targets simultaneously, with each gun automatically selecting the most threatening approach vector. Ships that had survived the initial bombardment found themselves picked apart by hundreds of smaller weapons. Corvettes exploded as laser fire found their fuel systems. Modified cargo haulers broke apart under sustained plasma bombardment. Even some of the larger vessels found their approach runs cut short by concentrated defensive fire, but the real revelation came when the first ship actually managed to close with a human destroyer. The pirate corvette Bloodfang, damaged but still functional, slammed into the side of the TRFS Dauntless at ramming speed. The impact should have destroyed both vessels or at least crippled the human ship. Instead, the Bloodfang crumpled against the Dauntless's hull like a tin can hitting a brick wall, leaving only a slight scorch mark on the destroyer's armor. Captain Elena Vasquez on the Dauntless barely felt the impact. "Damage report," she called out calmly. "Minor hull scoring on Section 7, her damage control officer reported. "No penetration, no casualties. Ship remains fully operational." The secret lay in human materials science. While other species built their ships with traditional metal alloys and energy shielding, human vessels incorporated revolutionary advances in molecular engineering. Their hulls were constructed from metamaterials that could absorb and distribute kinetic energy across the entire ship structure, making them incredibly resistant to physical damage. Krelinox watched in disbelief as ship after ship smashed uselessly against the human fleet. A few of his vessels managed to cause minor damage, but nothing that significantly impacted the destroyer's combat capability. Meanwhile, the human point defense systems continued their methodical destruction of his remaining forces. "Sir, we've lost over 90% of the fleet," Gorvek reported, his voice hollow with shock. "The humans. They're not even bothering to maneuver anymore. They're just sitting there and destroying everything we throw at them." The Death's Edge was barely functional, its shields completely failed, and its hull breached in dozens of places. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge as life support systems struggled to maintain atmosphere. "How many ships do we have left?" Krelinox asked. 47 operational vessels, sir." "Most of them are damaged." Krelinox stared at the tactical display showing the human fleet. All 50 destroyers remained in perfect formation, their shields glowing softly as they absorbed the occasional hit from his remaining ships. They looked completely undamaged, as if the entire battle had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet." Captain Webb's face appeared on the main screen again. This time, Krelinox noticed something different in the human's expression. There was no anger, no satisfaction at his victory. Just professional competence and perhaps a hint of pity. "Captain Krelinox," Webb said quietly, "you've lost. Your fleet is destroyed, your cause is hopeless, and continuing this fight will only result in more unnecessary deaths. I'm offering you one final chance to surrender. Why?" Krelinox snarled. "Why show mercy to pirates?" "Because that's who we are," Webb replied simply. "The Terran Federation believes in justice, not revenge. Surrender, and you'll be given fair trials. Your crews will be treated according to galactic law." For a long moment, the bridge of the Death's Edge was silent except for the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the crackle of damaged systems. Krelinox looked around at his surviving crew, seeing defeat and despair in their eyes. "Sir," Gorvik said quietly, "perhaps it's time to consider the human's offer. We've done terrible things, but maybe ... Krelinox roared, his cybernetic arm whirring as he drew his sidearm and pointed it at his second-in-command. "I am Krelinox the Butcher. I do not surrender to inferior species." But even as he spoke, Krelinox could see the doubt in his crew's eyes. They had followed him because they believed he was invincible, that his reputation and ruthlessness would protect them from any enemy. The human fleet had shattered that belief in less than 2 hours. The rebellion started small. A single weapons officer on one of the remaining destroyers powered down his guns and sent a surrender signal to the human fleet. Then another ship followed suit. Within minutes, the revolt had spread throughout the surviving vessels. "Sir," Gorvek said, stepping away from Kralanox's weapon. It's over. The crews are surrendering. The war is finished. Kralanox looked around his bridge one final time. The crew that had once feared and respected him were now looking at him with something approaching pity. His empire of terror had been destroyed by 50 ships from a species he had never heard of. Fine, he said, slowly lowering his weapon. Signal the humans. Tell them the Void Reapers surrender. Captain Webb accepted the surrender with characteristic human professionalism. Within hours, human boarding parties were moving through the surviving pirate vessels, providing medical aid to the wounded and securing prisoners. The efficiency and organization displayed by the human Marines impressed even the defeated pirates, but the real surprise came when the human medical teams began treating wounded pirates with the same care they showed their own personnel. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the chief medical officer from the Relentless, worked alongside alien medics to save the life of a critically injured Krythek pirate who had been trying to kill her just hours earlier. "Why are you helping me?" the insectoid asked weakly. "I am your enemy." Dr. Mitchell looked up from her medical scanner. "You were our enemy. Now you're a patient, and I took an oath to do no harm." This simple act of compassion, repeated dozens of times throughout the captured fleet, did more to convince the surviving pirates that they had truly lost than any display of firepower could have accomplished. The humans weren't just superior warriors. They were something the galaxy had rarely seen. Honorable ones. Word of the battle began spreading through galactic communication networks within hours. The first reports were dismissed as impossible, but as more details emerged, the galaxy's military leaders began to realize that everything they thought they knew about human capabilities was wrong. The species that had been laughed at for sending a small force had just accomplished what the combined might of the galaxy's major powers had been unable to do. And they had done it with a fleet that most military experts would have considered inadequate for the task. The laughter was about to stop. The Galactic Council emergency session was called within 6 hours of receiving the first confirmed reports from the Kepler system. The same chamber that had echoed with laughter just 2 days earlier now buzzed with urgent whispers and nervous energy as delegates tried to process what had happened. Admiral Zexstar stood before the holographic display again, but this time his scaled features showed confusion rather than amusement. The tactical breakdown of the battle played out in 3 dimensions, showing the systematic destruction of the Void Reaper fleet by forces that should have been overwhelmed within minutes. "These readings must be incorrect," he insisted, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. 50 frigates cannot generate this level of firepower. It's physically impossible." Counselor Yithran activated the communication array, and the image of Captain Webb appeared in the center of the chamber. The human officer looked tired but satisfied, standing on what appeared to be the bridge of his flagship. "Captain Webb," Yithran began, "the Council requests a full explanation of the events in the Kepler system. Our intelligence networks are reporting that your fleet engaged and defeated a force 16 times larger in less than 2 hours. Webb nodded politely. "That's correct, Counselor. The Void Reapers have been neutralized. Captain Kralanox and his surviving crew are in custody, and we're currently securing the freed colonists and captured vessels." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The Morvani delegate slithered forward, his multiple eye stalks focused intently on the human captain. "How is this possible? Our tactical analysis suggested your fleet would be destroyed within minutes of engaging the pirates." "Your analysis was based on incomplete information," Webb replied calmly. "The ships of the Rapid Response Fleet were designed specifically for this type of mission. We've been developing these technologies for several years." Ambassador Velthari of the Nexari leaned forward, her crystalline form shimmering with agitation. "What technologies?" "Our sensors detected no significant differences between your vessels and standard frigate-class ships." Webb smiled slightly. That was the point. The Terran Federation learned long ago that deception can be as valuable as firepower in warfare. Our destroyers were built to appear unremarkable while carrying capabilities far beyond what their size would suggest. General Mordick of the Fanny Confederacy gestured with his tentacles toward the tactical display. The power readings we're seeing are impossible for vessels of that size. Your ships were generating energy signatures equivalent to battle cruisers. Miniaturization, Webb explained. While other species scaled up their technology to create larger ships, humanity focused on making our systems more efficient. Our power plants, weapons, and shields are the same models used on much larger vessels, but we've learned to pack them into smaller hulls. The explanation sent ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. If humans could make frigate-sized ships with battlecruiser capabilities, what could they do with actual battlecruisers? Admiral Zexstar struggled to maintain his composure. Even with advanced technology, you were still outnumbered 16-1. Numbers should have mattered in the engagement of that scale. Webb's expression grew more serious. Admiral, you're thinking about this the wrong way. The Void Reapers weren't 16 individual threats. They were one large target spread across multiple platforms. Our doctrine focuses on eliminating enemy capabilities systematically rather than trying to match numbers with numbers. The human captain gestured, and the tactical display shifted to show the battle from a different perspective. The 50 human ships moved like a single organism, each destroyer perfectly positioned to support the others while maximizing their combined firepower. This is called coordinated warfare, Webb continued. Every ship in our fleet is connected through quantum communication networks. Our targeting computers share information instantaneously, allowing us to concentrate fire on the most important targets while avoiding redundant attacks. The Krythek ambassador clicked his mandibles nervously. Your crews must be exceptional warriors to execute such complex maneuvers under combat conditions. They are, Webb agreed. But it's more than that. Every human in our military trains, from childhood and conflict resolution and tactical thinking. We've had to fight for survival our entire history, first on our homeworld and then during our expansion into space. This revelation sent another wave of unease through the Council. Most species had achieved spaceflight during peaceful periods of their development, with military technology being a relatively recent development. The idea of an entire species raised from birth to understand warfare was deeply unsettling. Ambassador Chun, who had remained silent throughout the questioning, finally stood to address the Council. The Terran Federation wants to make something very clear. We didn't develop these capabilities to threaten other species or to build an empire. We built them because we learned that the galaxy can be a dangerous place and peaceful people need to be prepared to defend themselves. But surely, the Nexari ambassador protested, such powerful military technology could be used for conquest as easily as defense. Chun's expression was grave. Yes, it could. That's why the Federation operates under strict oversight and constitutional limits on military action. Our forces are designed to protect, not to conquer, Webb nodded in agreement. The rapid response. Fleet exists specifically to deal with threats like the Void Reapers. Pirates, raiders, and other criminals who prey on innocent civilians. We're not interested in territorial expansion or military dominance. Admiral Zexstar wasn't convinced. How can we be certain of your intentions? You've just demonstrated that. Human military capabilities far exceed anything we previously understood. What's to stop you from turning those weapons against legitimate governments? The question hung in the air for a long moment. The assembled delegates realized they were facing a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. A species they had dismissed as militarily insignificant had just proven they could defeat forces that would challenge some of the galaxy's major powers. Webb's response was measured and thoughtful. Admiral, I could give you political assurances or sign treaties, but I think actions speak louder than words. Right now, my fleet is providing humanitarian aid to the victims of pirate attacks, medical care to wounded prisoners, and security for damaged colonies. We're not claiming territory or demanding tribute. We're doing exactly what we said we would do, protecting innocent people from criminals. Furthermore, Chun added, The Terran Federation is proposing the establishment of a joint task force for dealing with piracy and organized crime in the Outer Rim. We're willing to share some of our defensive technologies with allied species and coordinate our operations through the Council. This offer created a stir among the delegates. The prospect of gaining access to human military technology was tempting, but it also raised questions about dependency and security. Councillor Yithron called for order before addressing both humans. The Council will need time to consider these developments and your proposals. In the meantime, Captain Webb, what are your immediate plans? We'll be remaining in the Kepler system for another 48 hours to complete rescue operations and transfer prisoners to appropriate authorities, Webb replied. After that, we'll return to Federation space unless the Council requests our assistance with other security matters. As the emergency session ended and the communication link closed, the delegates sat in stunned silence. The galaxy's power structure had just shifted dramatically and no one was quite sure what it meant for the future. But one thing was certain: no one would be laughing at human small forces ever again. 3 months later, the effects of what galactic media had dubbed the Kepler incident were still reverberating throughout known space. The mining colony of New Perth had been rebuilt with assistance from the Terran Federation, and Captain Kralinox had been sentenced to life imprisonment on a maximum security facility in the core worlds. But the real changes went far deeper than the fate of a single pirate fleet. Admiral Zexstar stood in his private office aboard the Vorthic flagship Dominion, studying intelligence reports that had been flooding in for weeks. Every major power in the galaxy was desperately trying to understand human military capabilities, and the results were deeply unsettling to those who had grown comfortable with the existing balance of power. Sir, his aide, Commander Velthic, reported as he entered the office, the intelligence analysis you requested is complete. Zexstar activated the holographic display, revealing a comprehensive breakdown of human military technology based on observations from the Kepler battle and subsequent diplomatic exchanges. What did we learn? He asked grimly. The humans weren't lying about miniaturization, Velthic replied. Our scientists confirmed that their power generation, weapons, and defensive systems are indeed equivalent to what we use on much larger vessels. But that's not the most concerning part. The display shifted to show comparative fleet compositions. Sir, we've been thinking about this wrong. We assumed the 50 ships they sent represented a significant portion of their military strength. Intelligence now suggests that was a single task force from a much larger fleet. Zexstar felt his blood run cold. How much larger? Preliminary estimates suggest the Terran Federation operates approximately 400 ships of similar capability, organized into 8 separate rapid response fleets. And that's just their expeditionary forces. The implications were staggering. If 50 human destroyers could eliminate 800 pirate vessels, what could 400 accomplish against a conventional fleet? What about their home defense forces? Zexstar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Unknown, sir. But if their expeditionary fleets are any indication, Earth and the other core Federation worlds are probably the most heavily defended systems in the galaxy. Meanwhile, in the Krythek Collective's primary war chamber, similar conversations were taking place. The insectoid species had built their reputation on swarm tactics and numerical superiority, but the human approach to warfare challenged everything they thought they knew about space combat. The humans fight like we do, observed War Speaker Clichter, her compound eyes studying tactical projections. They coordinate their forces perfectly and strike with overwhelming firepower. But they do it with individual ships instead of swarms. Her subordinate, Subspeaker Vexstar, gestured with his mandibles toward the display. Each human ship functions as both an individual unit and part of a larger organism. Their technology allows them to share information instantaneously across their entire fleet. This quantum communication network they mentioned, Clichter mused. If we could develop similar technology... Our scientists are already working on it, War Speaker. But the humans have had years to perfect their systems. We are starting from zero. The conversation was interrupted by an aide who approached with obvious nervousness. War Speaker, we've received a communication from the Terran Federation. They're proposing joint training exercises. Clickter's mandibles clicked in surprise. Joint exercises? With whom? With us, War Speaker. And with the Thani Confederacy and the Nexari Commonwealth. They want to establish what they call interspecies tactical cooperation protocols. This was unprecedented. Military exercises between species were rare and usually limited to simple patrol coordination. The humans were proposing actual combat training with their most advanced units, back on Earth. In the Terran Federation's military headquarters in Geneva, Fleet Admiral Rebecca Zhang reviewed the latest reports from diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy. The response to humanity's demonstration of military capability had been exactly what she had predicted, a mixture of fear, respect, and desperate attempts to understand human technology. Status report on the cooperation initiatives? She asked her aide, Commander David Park. Better than expected, Admiral. The Krythek have agreed to join exercises, and the Thani want to discuss technology sharing agreements. Even the Vorthak have approached us about establishing formal military cooperation protocols. Zhang nodded approvingly. Good, fear might keep potential enemies at bay, but cooperation builds lasting peace. There have been some concerning developments, though, Park continued. Intelligence suggests several species are attempting to reverse engineer our technology based on sensor readings from Kepler. And there are reports of military buildups in some of the more aggressive systems. Expected, Zhang replied. We knew that revealing our capabilities would trigger an arms race. The key is to stay ahead of it while building alliances with reasonable powers. The Admiral activated a holographic star map showing the current deployment of Federation fleets. What's the status of our expansion into the Outer Rim? Excellent, Admiral. 3 more colonial governments have requested Federation protection, and piracy incidents have dropped by 70% in sectors where our patrols operate. Captain Webb's task force has become something of a legend out there. Indeed, the Rapid Response Fleet had become the stuff of spacer legends in the months following Kepler. Stories spread through the Outer Rim about the Ghost. Destroyers that could appear anywhere without warning and eliminate. Entire pirate fleets in hours, but perhaps the most significant development was taking place in the Galactic Council chambers, where Ambassador Chun was addressing a special session on military cooperation and security. The Terran Federation proposes the establishment of a multi-species rapid response force, she announced to the assembled delegates. A joint fleet designed to respond quickly to piracy, terrorism, and other criminal activities that threaten peaceful commerce and civilian populations. The response was immediate and varied. Some delegates showed obvious interest, while others appeared deeply suspicious of human motives. Counselor Yithran called for order before addressing the human ambassador. This proposal would require unprecedented cooperation between species with very different military doctrines and technologies. How would such a force operate? Each member species would contribute ships and personnel according to their capabilities, Chan explained. The fleet would operate under joint command structure with rotating leadership. Human ships would provide heavy firepower and coordination technology, while other species could contribute specialized capabilities like sensor systems, medical facilities, or boarding parties. Admiral Zexstar activated his communication channel. Ambassador Chun, while the Vorthak Empire appreciates the offer, we must ask, what guarantees can you provide that this joint force won't become a tool for human expansion? Chun's response was immediate and confident. Admiral, I think recent events have demonstrated that if the Terran Federation wanted to expand militarily, we wouldn't need to hide behind joint operations to do it. We're proposing cooperation because we believe it's more effective than any single species acting alone. She gestured to the tactical displays showing recent anti-piracy operations. In the 3 months since Kepler, joint human-alien patrols have been more successful than purely human operations. Different species bring different strengths to the table. The Nexari ambassador Valthari shimmered as she spoke. What kind of technology sharing would be involved in such cooperation? Limited but significant, Chun replied. We're prepared to share defensive technologies, communication systems, and tactical coordination protocols. Weapons technology would remain restricted, but we believe the defensive capabilities alone would significantly improve the effectiveness of Allied forces. Over the following weeks, the debates continued, but the momentum was clearly building toward acceptance of the human proposal. The Outer Rim colonies in particular were enthusiastic supporters of any initiative that would provide them with better protection. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, the first Joint Rapid Response Force was deployed to the frontier regions. The fleet consisted of 20 human destroyers, 15 Krythek swarm ships, 10 Thani heavy cruisers, and 5 Nexari sensor platforms. Under the rotating command structure, the force was initially led by Captain Webb, now promoted to Commodore. The mixed fleet's first major operation was against a resurgent pirate confederation that had formed in the aftermath of the Void Reaper's destruction. The battle lasted less than an hour, with the combined capabilities of the different species proving devastatingly effective against conventional pirate tactics. As reports of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, the tone of discussions about humanity began to change. The species that had been laughed at for sending a small force was now being recognized as a leader in military innovation and galactic security, but perhaps the most significant change was in humanity itself. The Terran Federation had learned that revealing their true capabilities brought both opportunities and responsibilities. They were no longer the unknown newcomers to galactic civilization, but active participants in shaping its future. Captain Webb, now commanding the joint task,